All right, well, it's been a great session yesterday and today, and to know that I could actually have a chance to live another 50 years and work with Todd at KPMG for 50 more years. It's just, it boggles my mind. So, our teams are going to love it too, Todd. So I'm Chad Seiler with KPMG. I lead our tech, media, and telco business. That just means that I am privileged to spend every day in the middle of the hornet's nest of some of the best companies out there, not only using AI and technology around it, but creating AI and all the technology around it. And so I'm excited to be here. I'm joined by two amazing business leaders today, starting with you, Yvette. We've got Yvette, who's a pioneer in the technology industry. She has a career going back to the days of the DVD creation, the creation of streaming, the creation of video on demand, early AI algorithms. She's gotten multiple Emmy Awards, including a Lifetime Achievement Award for all of her work in those technology areas, so congratulations for that. Yvette is currently a partner at JC2 Ventures with John Chambers, so she's in the middle of a lot of startups and hot companies in and around AI. We're happy to have you with us, Yvette, so thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
We got Sharon Zhou, who is a trailblazer in the world of AI. She leads AI for AMD in her new gig, which is great. Congratulations on that. Prior to that, she was the founder and CEO of Lamini, which is all in and around LLMs and all the technology surrounding that, which we'll hear from her about today. She's got an interesting background in the classics, having studied that at Harvard, and then following that with a computer science PhD from Stanford. So you're kind of in that blending of the technology and the robots and the humans. So we'd love to kind of hear about that today as well. So thanks to both of you for joining us. We've got a short panel. It's 30 minutes. It's actually 28 minutes left to go. So we're going to assume that a lot of baseline knowledge around Gen AI, how it works, its implications on the world are sort of broadly known by the audience, but we are going to step into some big questions on what does this all mean and get provocative and have a little fun with that question. We're going to talk about some of the risks that are out there that may get in our way of adopting AI more broadly going forward, and then try to leave the audience with some practical takeaways that you can execute on Monday when you get back to the office. So, and if we have some time for questions in the audience, we'll get to it. But let's just jump right in. Yvette, starting with you, what does this all mean? Where are we going from here?
Yeah, so I think, I love all of the discussion and we have a lot of technical facts, a lot of things. Everybody here is doing AI in some way, and there's a lot of talk about use cases and now agentic. But the way I look at it, if we kind of fast forward, and to your point, where are we going? I thought about that answer when we brainstormed where to take this session, and I would just put forth, can you imagine all of this agentic goes forward? All of us are going to have our own agent. That agent knows us really well. They know that I love pastrami sandwiches. They know just how I like my bread and pastrami. They know everything about me. So we're not going to call and look up which store to buy from anymore. We're going to tell our agent, I want a sandwich, get me a sandwich, right? So everything is going to be super personal with that agent. And that has some major implications, in my opinion. If you imagine that, then having the agent that is the front line to you becomes the race. And so you think of all the things happening today, all of the M&A, and we wonder, why is this company, Meta, spending this much on this and Google spending that much on that? Because the race to be that agent is everything. It changes the way we advertise. It changes the way, think about it, you want to buy broadband. You move into somewhere. Are you going to pick Verizon or Comcast or whatever it is to connect? No, you're going to tell your agent, get me the best deal and get me the highest bandwidth. So deal making and how it is that it's going to be your agent versus somebody agent and all this agent to agent communication. And so how do business models change? And I think I would put that forth as a really provocative way to think about the future. It's no longer us and advertising to us. It's our agents and their agents as to how the world's going to turn.
Interesting. Sharon, what's your view?
Yeah, so I'll take it from a more technology standpoint and share a little bit more from what I'm seeing as an AI researcher. So I think the trend of models getting larger and more intelligent will continue to grow. Basically, something we know as scaling laws. So scaling laws essentially dictates that with more data and with more compute, we'll get more and more intelligent models. And these will get larger and larger. But one issue with a model that's super large, trillions of parameters, is that it's slower, right? And our demand for faster models is increasing, right? So people want models that respond to them super quickly. They want a bunch of agents talking to each other all at once, so high throughput. So what are some of the processes that frontier labs are taking to make these models more efficient? One of them is called a mixture of experts. You might have heard of it, MOE. And it's essentially, instead of having the entire model brain respond to a request from a user, it's saying, actually, we're going to have a team of experts and only route it to a couple of those experts to respond for every query. And it intelligently will route it to the right team of experts. It's kind of like going to a team of people versus just one really intelligent savant who will take a longer time to kind of figure out what the right answer is. Another really interesting trend is around knowledge distillation. And I find this a really interesting thing. So the reason why you often, when a new model comes out and it's kind of slower and more expensive, but then the cost drops dramatically, is due to a bit of this knowledge distillation. And what this is you have your really big model, it's the teacher, and it wants to teach a smaller student model how to respond in a similar way. And what I find really interesting is that we always necessarily need to train a larger and larger teacher from all our data. But the teacher can give extremely rich signals back to the student, like smaller model, so we'll need to necessarily train a bigger teacher first, and then we can distill it down to a smaller little student or set of students. And the reason why the teacher can give such rich signals is because when the teacher's learning, it's not as rich signals. It's maybe it has an example that says the sky is blue, and it learns that that's the right sentence. But the student will actually learn from the teacher. The teacher will say the sky is blue, but it's not just the sky is blue. It'll see that the teacher has thought about not just the color blue. Maybe they see the sky is, and then blue is a really high probability, 90% high probability. But maybe 5% of the time it says orange. Right, because sunset, and another 5% it says yellow. So basically, the teacher gives very rich signals back, and it may be for the word the, it's 0%, right? The sky is really it makes no sense. So the student sees all of those examples in just one example from the teacher to the student, and that's how we distill that knowledge down to these smaller models extremely efficiently. Yeah, so I just want to share a little bit of the trends I'm seeing in these models, and I think they're highly driven by consumer usage, right? They're highly driven by what we do on inference, what Grok mentioned, but essentially that's what we're doing as AI researchers. We're distillation of this type of training, but we are changing the way we are training these models so that we can deliver inference for the user that is fast and valuable. And this is what we think a lot about at AMD. There are huge teams at AMD doing AI. It's definitely not just me. And they're optimizing this chip for both inference and training, and to make it possible for this to be extra fast.
Hey, Sharon, sticking with the technology for a second, as the cost continues to massively decline to use the technology, what does that mean in terms of where we're going from there on cost, adoption? Does it drive more adoption? How do you think about that?
I think it dramatically increases the amount of adoption, right? Anything where the price drops, you can use more of. And I think this opens up more and more possibilities. And I think this opens up the possibility of having multiple agents, for example. Right now, I know that there are a bunch of coding assistants that are very effective at helping programmers code, myself code. And I was talking to someone last night, and they said that programmers are being very, they're at the forefront, I think, of using this technology. And instead of having, one assistant, they're already launching, 12 assistants at a time, which is costing the model companies quite a bit because they want to, oh, here you can clean up my database, and here you can clean up my front end. And so people are already kind of trying to parallelize their efforts with many, many agents.
Interesting. Yvette, back to the human side. If AI can automate just about anything, and we're getting there pretty quickly, what does that mean to human intuition and agency for workers in business?
Well, that's a big question. I think that I guess if you really take this pretty deep and you think about everything that AI can do, and this era of AGI, it's real, it's happening, we can see it. We can argue about when it's going to happen, but we can see it happening, and everything is learned and agentic. Think about everything we study in school, and take something like a product manager. A product manager is our company's bread and butter, right? We're different, we're competitive. What do you learn in school when you become a product manager? Do your competitive research, do your market research, do your pricing research. Can't all of that be learned by AI? So you wonder, where is the differentiator going to be? This human approach is every product going to be the same? Does AI just tell us what our product's going to be? Is it going to be better than human thought? So I think we have to rethink what the human factor is. It's not as much what are we going to go study? Like, it's a big question. And I think that one of the things that really stands out to me in the presentations is we have to go fast, we have to be strategic, we have to really, really take this serious, whatever it is, right, from the various discussions, because this change is very real. And I think that the job aspect is going to change from how well do you write, and did you get what number on your SAT, and what do you do at school, and what grades did you get, to a very different thing, which is how much drive do you have? How much do you understand transformation? Because there are some driven people out there, and you can go to a school and they're a B student instead of an A student, and I'd rather have a B student that has amazing drive than I would have an A student that knows how to do all of the things that are going to be automated, and they can't help me with that transformation. It is a very different way of thinking. I think we hire wrong. I think our systems are set up wrong. Everything has to be turned on its head, and it's up to us to do it, and the first one that gets there will be better than those that don't.
Yeah, we talked about Gen Z when we got together, and the fact that a lot of Gen Z doesn't want to do a lot of work. They want to have a lot of breaks. They don't want to be partners at KPMG. They just kind of want to work there versus make a career there. You have that dynamic on one hand, and on the other hand, you have this dynamic that AI is going to take a whole bunch of jobs potentially in the future. Like, how does that square? I'm curious your perspective, both of you, on that one. Maybe Sharon, starting with you.
Yeah, well, I think similar to drive, I think of it also as curiosity. It's really important, I think, for the future of education, whether that be of students in universities, high schools, et cetera today, or workers today who need to be upskilled in AI or other disciplines that will assume we use AI in their jobs. So that will be really, really important moving forward. And one thing I think about is if you're not curious and you don't have that drive for something, I don't know if you'll beat AI at it. And so I really encourage people to allow themselves to find what they're curious about, because then AI becomes your tool, and it actually enables you to learn even more than what you had before. Just to give an example, I grew up in the age of Google, and I would say without Google, I don't think I would be the student I became later on. I'm very slow at reading, actually, like very slow at reading books, and that was the age before Google. But with search, I was able to search and find the needle in the haystack very effectively, and I was very good at using that. This is a much bigger step, a much bigger leap in technology than just search. AI is enabling just about anything right now. And I think someone who can use AI as their thought partner will be someone who is very, very effective at their job moving forward. And so I encourage people to rethink not just education, but also just also their evaluation and interview process. An AI company I was talking to, they actually, they just removed all their existing interview processes, and they now give a very difficult question that assumes the interviewee is going to use AI very effectively. So they're also assessing how good is this person at using AI. So they're asking a programmer to build an entire app within a day, which normally would have taken a team months to build, and that's their interview question. So they're assuming you're using AI, and if you can't, then you're not gonna be able to build that. And they're also, this is like a funny, I don't know if you've seen it, but there is a funny or interesting company called Cluely, and their whole thing is we're going to help you cheat at your coding interviews or different things, and we give you, during your interview, we give you like the answers from the AI at the same time. And I think this has made obviously a lot of companies very upset, but I think moving forward, even thinking through, okay, well, what if I can give someone a hard enough question essentially to assess their skills, assuming they're using Cluely. And I find that really interesting, and I think that's the adaptation we need to see, so that it's not cheating or seen as cheating so much as it's just a new type of technology that we can push people towards.
I couldn't agree more. I think that you're spot on. I think drive, I think this curiosity, I think assume the future instead of living in the past. So everything you said is spot on. And I think that the Gen Z question, it's very real, because every day I read that, well, we have to understand Gen Alpha, we have to understand Gen Z, there's a lot of focus on mental health, there's a lot of focus on taking breaks, there's a lot of anxiety, and this is real. So it's not something to laugh about. And on the one hand, you say, okay, well, we don't want to work as the same as you did, mom, dad, grandma, whatever. You guys worked so hard. We want to work hard, but we want to have this focus on our mental health. And then well, AI is here to help, and there's their fear of AI, but AI is here to help, so it's like, it's great, right? It's a beautiful day. The two things work together perfectly. But I think that bridge is something that we have to figure out how to guide the next generation. So I think that the whole system of hiring has to go towards exactly what you said, which is embrace AI. Do these students or do these employees or experienced employees, are they interviewing by saying, I understand that these tools are here to help me, instead of saying, what do you have without any technology? Well, we haven't done that. Why are we doing it for the future, right? So we have to all change the way we interview. We have to change the way we think. Who's going to be driven? Who's going to have the creativity? Who's going to have the drive? And who's going to say, I'm going to take everything I have, and here's how we're going to change the world. Those are the employees you want, right? So don't look at it as cheating. Embrace it and say, you are amazing and creative, and you're using all this stuff. And I think we have to change our whole ecosystem, the way we run the company, the way we interview, the way we transform our staff. And the talent is no longer in, I understand just how to do it myself. I understand how to do it myself, how to understand the things I don't know how to do, and how to transform them into the future.
And Yvette and I are trying to get our kids hired, so if anybody's hiring, please meet us in the lobby.
High drive.
Just after.
Curiosity.
Maybe pivoting a little bit to some of the risks. Sharon, curious, what's emerging or evolving that we maybe haven't seen yet or is coming that could change the trajectory of how AI adoption plays out that we need to be thinking about?
I actually think it's related to this upskilling thing. So it's related to people being able to adopt it effectively and with more people. I'm sure everyone has seen the headline now that Meta spends hundreds of millions per person in their AI research team. But I think that just shows how important talent is of someone who understands AI. And I think everyone can. This is something that I care deeply about in my role. I spend my time teaching on Coursera, at Harvard, at Stanford. Our collaborations, AMD has a lot of collaborations with different universities, and I teach a few million people online, developers, but also Harvard Business School, people who are figuring out like what management will look like in the future. So I think about this a lot. How do we create, taking a step back, okay, curiosity, how do we actually create also content that's engaging and that will engage people who are interested in different things to learn about AI as well. Because I think as an educator, it's also the responsibility is also on us to not just put out classes that look like definition of this is this, like very boring classes, but something that is engaging and that can entice someone to learn. Kind of a TikTok for education, maybe for Gen Z. But how can we do that? And so that's something I really think about a lot, and a lot of folks at AMD were thinking about how do we enable that next generation of workers, whether they be students or adults, learning more so that they can be more effective in their roles. And I think that will dramatically affect just the sheer orders of magnitude will dramatically affect whether we can adopt this technology or not, because I think a big gap is in the understanding of the technology to truly understand the risks of it.
And I think I'll add to that this reskilling is real, the hiring change is real, but to me, I'll just add to what you said that it's keeping the eye on the ball of how big this transformation is. If you take that story from the beginning to say, imagine that everything becomes agentic, it's my personal agent against a bigger agent because we're focused on better things, right? Because AI is doing this for us now. I don't really want to call 5 sandwich shops, right? I mean, that's a simple example. I don't really want to research all the broadband and you know, so it's nice to have this help. But if you think about that end, do you want to be the commoditized part, right? Where you're now you know, talking to agents and you're an invisible factor, or do you want to be on the front line and be a visible factor? This is a huge change for all of our companies. This is a consumer example, but it's going to be the same in all areas of business. Are we going to be on the front line, or are we going to be commoditized on the back line? And I think that for our talent has to think that creatively. So it's not just focusing on learn this tool, understand this tool. We have to think. And then one of the things about, you know, generational shifts is these generations can shift their thoughts fast, right? There's a lot of multitasking, so we can fail fast, we can go fast, and I think that's where we have to go. We have to in our reskilling, think about that end game and how are we moving fast enough and iterating fast enough to get there. And I think this explains a lot of the investments in people because the game's afoot, right? And it's moving fast.
I don't know that we can do it. I think the human's going to get in the way. I think the millennials are going to get in the way, the Gen Z are going to get in the way. I think it's going to be really hard, and it's going to be a pretty tough pivot over the next 10 years is my perspective. But
sink or swim.
Yeah. Over the next, you have visibility into an incredible base of portfolio companies, you and John. You see what companies are doing as they adopt. What are some of the risks you're seeing? What are people getting wrong? I know you've got a passion around some of the cyber side of this. What are you seeing out there in the portfolio?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many different angles. Risk is a huge thing, and I'm on a bunch of boards. And then you look at what risk oversight, what questions should you ask as a board member to make sure companies are looking at their risk. And I think it's a really complicated question. Maybe we'll start with regulation, right? Something that's fixed risk where you can just do compliance, right? I think that if you think about this kind of change of the world in a truly AGI environment and everything's agentic, I think that regulation becomes really important. How do you make sure that you don't have one king and everything else? If you imagine this and everybody becomes commoditized, how are we going to change the way that these agents interact? And that regulation is not being looked at because we're on regulation about AI and privacy, and we're still in the infant steps. So I think that we have to really step up and pay attention. And all of us as companies, we have to help lead that and guide that. That regulation does have to become more collaborative. Do you want to pick an agent that has a stamp of fairness and a stamp of transparency and a stamp of I'm going to do things in the right way? I would pick that agent for me more than I'd pick one that's a black box and I don't know what you're doing and what kind of money you're making in the background. So I think that stamp of approval will I don't know what that is yet, but we're getting there, right, in the regulation. And of course the privacy and everything. Cyber's interesting because I think that, again, fairness, transparency, there's a lot of cyber solutions. I'm using AI to do this, and it's a black box, and nobody knows what I'm doing in our network. We talked about cyber risk quantification last night, not so much the quantification of money, which I don't really personally believe in as much as quantifying that you have good practices and that you're doing things right. I think we're going to more and more get around what is the transparent, fair way of asking the right risk questions, and then where we have to go with regulation. Maybe I'll start with that because it's such a big question.
Excellent. Sharon, you spent a lot of time around hallucinations and sort of the quality of what's coming out.
I thought we weren't talking
models.
about that with her. I'm just kidding.
Where are we in that now? How is that? Is that getting cleaned up? Where do we go with that? How long is that going to be sort of a mega risk for AI?
Yeah, I think it's tough because AI is a probabilistic system as opposed to a deterministic system. So a deterministic system will always produce the same output all the time, whereas, and you can kind of often understand why it's producing a certain output, but a probabilistic system outputs probabilities of things. So again, the sky's blue. Blue is a probability, right? It's not always going to be blue. But if it instead was not the word blue and it was, it was about a fact and it was a date, you don't want that to change, right? Maybe blue can range. Maybe you're talking about a sunset, right? But a fact doesn't really change. And so I think that's very difficult for AI to manage. But I think there are a few ways where I've seen people, at least right now, be able to manage that effectively. AI is really good at using tools, and maybe it can't effectively, add numbers, multiply numbers super effectively, but it is able to use a tool like a calculator to do that for it. Or like to get the current date, it can't do that because it was trained and then frozen in a point of time, so it thinks today is maybe in the past, or it just says, I can't respond to that because the people training the model decided we should just not respond because it's going to hallucinate, but it can use a tool that gets today's date on your computer. So I find that really interesting. Like where does AI really shine and where should it be really using a tool instead? And it is probably a little bit different from how we operate, but arguably I use this watch as a tool to get today's date as well. So I think thinking through, and this again is just understanding what is AI good at, what is actually underlying the technology, will help guide people towards using it effectively and to avoid things like hallucinations.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh yeah, and I think with regulation, it is really tough to regulate these things. I think as a community, we really want to find the right way to regulate them. But it moves so quickly, so it's also very, very hard to find what the right things are as we even invent new techniques over time.
One of the things, just kind of combining two of your stories, is accuracy and hallucination and this whole distillation. I'm really into this.
Yeah.
I really think that it's fascinating to me to make an LLM into an SLM, so to speak, right? And keep getting better and better for your particular model, right? So you start with something big, your teacher, as you were saying, and then you go into something that's very specific. If it's not useful to you, throw it out. If you hallucinate, it's something to learn it and throw the rest out. And so you become smaller and smaller and smaller as kind of reverting what you said earlier. And I do think that this is a very powerful trend that we're seeing to become more accurate and smaller. So you're going to get larger models to start. You're going to get smaller models that are very specific to you. And I'm highly invested in kind of the creating the model, distilling the model, and all of that. And I'm just curious, how do you see, if you don't mind me asking a question, just because I think that, because this is really how you get started, right? You start with something big,
Yeah.
and you got to pick your right partner to start with this big thing and get smaller. How do you see that process going?
Yeah.
How does somebody get started with that big and
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, across enterprises, I worked with a bunch of enterprises in my startup days. I've seen the kind of recipe that I've seen for success is start with a larger, more general model and prototype there as fast as possible, right? Start building out all of your agent workflows, et cetera. But once you find that one of them is kind of working, and you want to optimize it further, and you want to optimize it for, say, accuracy or cost or latency, speed, effectively, of the model, then you want to go to a smaller model that is just really laser focused, essentially. This mini model is laser focused on your task of a set of inputs and a set of outputs. And that model can be better than the bigger model at it. It can be faster and it can be cheaper. And so that's when you want to optimize for that particular workflow. And I've seen that to be very successful. So prototype, let your team move very quickly with a larger, more general model, but then go optimize the workflows where you're like, we're hitting this larger model a lot. How do we actually make this more domain specific that's useful for us, where the ROI actually makes sense? And at AMD, I'm also really happy to see that we are focused on enterprises as well. So if you're around later, Mark Papermaster, our CTO, is giving a talk around it as well. But essentially, I think enterprises will face slightly different challenges than the average developer at a startup, for example. And I think those challenges do matter, especially around the small model, the domain-specific model side.
So we're out of time. Rapid fire round. What would you leave the audience with, Yvette?
Well, I think that think big, think about this, what's going to happen in the future, and act fast and do something about it. I think that that's the best advice I can give. Fast.
Sharon?
Learn about AI, and feel free to find me later and tell me what you need to learn about AI better.
Awesome. Sharon, Yvette, thank you both so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.